Hey there, hope you're doing well. It's been a while since I did my last podcast, so apologies for that. Just been busy with a bunch of things. So in this podcast, this is a video podcast. So if you're watching it on, say, on Spotify or Amazon, you may not see the video, but I'll include a link below if you want to also see the visual. But I'm not showing anything. It's just me talking, so you don't miss much by not seeing the visuals. But you're welcome to check out that link. In this video, let's talk about, the topic essentially is going to be, you would have heard the word like mobile first, web first, or API first, or sometimes even database first. Let's just talk about what those things mean and how important they are when you're actually starting to build something new, right? Whether it's a brand new application or a new microservice or a micro front end, whatever it is that you're setting out to build. So mobile first is a terminology that came into existence, if I'm not wrong, a few years ago, maybe reasonably a good number of years ago, because folks were actually thinking web first, building a web application, and then sort of creating the mobile app as a follow-up to it, right? Not just the creation of the app, but the thought process itself was a follow-up to the web application. So you design the web app, then you started thinking about the mobile app, and you designed the native mobile app essentially, right? So that worked for some people, not for everybody, because the mobile usage has increased tremendously, as we all know, over the years. So designing something for the web and then porting it over to mobile didn't necessarily always make sense. It was not executed well either. So how many features, what should you be able to do on mobile compared to what you're able to do on the web? Do you port over every single feature? Do you take a subset of the features, or do you build something completely differently? I mean, you're solving the same problem, but possibly in different ways, right? And then the devil is in the detail. Maybe we'll take an example or two to understand that better. But that's when, at least as I recall, mobile first as a terminology came into being. I don't know if anyone ever said web first. That was kind of implicit. And then years down the road, we've started hearing the word API first, because as APIs became more and more popular, as companies started publishing their APIs they used internally, then started publishing to the external world so they can integrate with their systems. So API first became a popular terminology, right? I mean, they're not all analogous, like web and mobile first, maybe it's comparable because they're all UI based clients. API first means you're designing, you're thinking in terms of APIs and endpoints, whether it's REST or Graph or in the past SOAP or whatever it is going to be in future. You're thinking APIs, you're designing them, maybe not implementing them, right? Just stubbing them out, maybe not even stubbing them out, just documenting them, whether using Swagger or AWS or whether it's Open APIs or Blueprint or any of one of those commonly accepted formats. Open API obviously being the most popular one. You're creating those endpoints and APIs, thinking in those terms before you write any single line of code. And then you socialize those APIs with your internal teams or your external stakeholders, if that's your clientele, right? Clientele, and then they start consuming your endpoints and whatnot, right? Obviously, I'm trivializing a lot of this stuff, but just to convey the essence of what I'm trying to say here. That's API first. What else? I mean, database first, I don't know if there's such a terminology that's at least commonly used, but what that means is historically when you started to build stuff, you thought more from a database standpoint, right? You designed the database tables, the schema, and you spent a lot of time figuring that out before you did anything else at all. But I don't know if those terms are equally used. You may run into one more so than the other, but those are at least some of the common variations that I can think of. Now let's go to the next part of this video, which is the podcast. That is, which is the correct strategy? I mean, is there a right strategy? Is there something that's not so correct? Like in most things in life, not just in software, in life in general, I don't know if there's a blanket, the right way to do or the wrong way to do. It's along the lines of these coding standards and guidelines and conventions. There's none of it is like perfect, none of it is terrible. As long as things are consistent, you're generally all right? If your code is not perfect, but it's consistently inconsistent, if you will, then it's still acceptable, right? Where there's a problem is when it starts becoming inconsistent. I don't want to digress into code quality and whatnot, but what I'm trying to say is I don't know if there's a straightforward, correct or wrong answer. And I'll back that with actual experience and real life, even taking Snowpal, our own product, as an example, right? When we launched our web application with the responsive web app, so you could use it on your mobile devices, but we didn't have a mobile app. Our plan was to just add more features on top of that, have responsive web mobile support, but not essentially immediately build a mobile app. But that, as it turned out, it was not the best of plans, because more people wanted to be able to use it on mobile, even if they're not spending all of their time on mobile, just because it's smaller real estate, it's not easy on the eyes. Folks still want to be able to do or complete an activity or kick off an activity on their mobile devices, and the native mobile experience was quite different, right? It's very hard to build these hybrid or progressive or responsive apps. They're fine, but they're not anywhere close to native mobile apps. So we had to jump the gun, change our roadmap a bit, and then we started working on the mobile app as a follow-up to the web app, native mobile app, just as a follow-up to the web app after we launched it. So a few months or 6 months later, give or take, we launched our native mobile app. And then we've been making more progress since then, but we're kicking off a couple other projects, but that's outside the realm of this conversation. The reason I even mentioned that is because we do have a very, very rich API layer, and you'll know more about that shortly, I promise. But currently we are only consumers from an API standpoint. What that means is we could have designed the web app to be a single monolith that had all of it self-contained, so you couldn't separate out the API dependencies, right? But that's not how we designed it. Even though we were not necessarily thinking of everything down the road, we did the best we could, and you should always do that, right? I mean, it sounds cliched, but I know more often than not it slips through the cracks, and we don't do it that way. So we built a web app and then the mobile. So ours was not a mobile first strategy. When we are starting out to doing newer things today, we might do it quite differently. Maybe, right? And maybe there are cases where we see a need to build something that's primarily useful on the web, not so much on mobile. In those cases, we might take a web first strategy. In other cases, we might take a mobile first strategy, or somewhere in between. And there are plenty of other scenarios coming up in future where we're going to design our APIs first, right? So there's a variety of these combinations. We'll come to database first in a second, because you don't see that happen all that often now. The very first version of our product, which not the very first released version, the very first version in mind, the very first internal versions, we did spend a lot of time making our database a whole lot, pretty robust, right? It was actually MySQL, not MySQL, it's RDBMS at the time. Maybe it was MySQL, yeah, it was. But we moved to NoSQL soon enough later, right? So the production system is on NoSQL and Mongo primarily. But we had started out with RDBMS, and I remember very vividly spending several weeks designing all of the tables, the indices, the table spaces, even naming it, going to a large extent. Because that's the world I was in at that point of time. So before writing any single line of code, the database schema was very robust, and there were like 80 different tables. Unfortunately, we didn't have a single DAO or a single line of code to consume or write data to those tables. And for a small shop, we realized that's not necessarily the best way to go. I mean, it may have been a good way to go for large organizations, at least at that point of time, but not necessarily for us, right? So that's an example of following a methodology that you may have been used to in the past, almost quote unquote blindly, and taking it forward, and that may not actually help you. So back to what I was trying to say earlier. I don't know if there's a single best strategy, right? You have to ask yourself, what are you trying to build? What is the core problem that you're trying to solve? It will take a little bit of time to socialize, let the world understand that, but you should know what you're exactly trying to do today, tomorrow, 6 months down the road, 12 months down the road, and further beyond, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be marching correctly in that direction. Whether you're going fast or slow, I think, was it not Martin Luther King Jr. MLK who said that you want to be walking in, no matter how slow you are. Sorry, I'm just paraphrasing a beautiful quote. I don't want to mess it up. But it was along the lines of, it doesn't matter if you can fly, you walk, if you can walk, you crawl, but you have to keep moving. You just have to keep moving, right? That couldn't be any more truer today than it was when he probably said that. So you just have to keep moving, hopefully in the right direction. If not, you do course correction. That's bound to happen. So don't get bogged down by these terminologies, by what you read, about what's recommended. just think for yourself, right? Hey, what am I trying to build? What is the core problem I'm trying to solve? How can I do it in the best possible manner given the resources and time and money and everything that I do have? Even if doing mobile first or API first or whatever first is actually, my screen went blank here, hopefully it's still recording. No matter what on paper seems like the right thing to do, it doesn't matter. It's what gets you to do the stuff as soon as you can and as well as you can, right? And the answer is certainly not going to be straightforward. If you're building something which is exclusively used on mobile, obviously it's mobile first because there's no web to begin with. But if it's primarily also used on mobile, maybe mobile first is a strategy. A lot of what we're building, we find equal use on the web or on mobile. We need a ton of real estate, so we obviously want to be able to support web apps. We also want folks to be able to continue, pick up what they do when they're on the move. So we want to have a mobile app as well, unfortunately, right? You have to build to all of these different devices and device sizes. The Snowpal mobile app actually has, I want to say like 75% of the features. I could be wrong of what you have on the web. You could do plenty of stuff. Not all of it, but plenty of it. And even the part where you can do, maybe it's richer and a little bit nicer on the web just because we have more space and we have nicer, richer looking chats. You know, the same mind map looks more beautiful on the web than on the mobile device just because it's small. It's the same chat, it just looks prettier. But we have been in that mode where we support both platforms, right? Going forward, it might change. We might be doing some things that are primarily web only, some mobile only, some both, some all, whatever it is. So again, another example of don't get bogged down by terminologies. Ask yourself questions, more questions the merrier, socialize with your stakeholders and see how what methodology might work best for you and your team so you can actually get things moving forward. Sometimes the answer could be, yeah, APIs, defining the APIs because UI team needs to start building the user interfaces, the UI and UX. You haven't started coding at all from an API standpoint, but they need something to actually deal with, right? So maybe you give them the endpoints, you give them whether it's Graph or REST or whatnot, so they can hit the ground running. And maybe those endpoints are not even stubbed out. Maybe hopefully your API team stubs them out, sends out mock responses, or you just stick it on Swagger or Postman and have it serve these mock responses. The UI team could do that as well, as long as you give them the structure of what the response should look like, what the request response exchange should be. Either party could do it, even though I still feel like the API team should be doing it. It seems like it's their job. At least that's how we do it at Snowpal. But hopefully this gives you some context. I hope that helped at least a tiny bit, right? And before I end the video, remember to just sign up on snowpal.com. You can use it at work, in school, in college, for travel, for planning, for weddings, parties, and whatnot, right? It's a generic platform with verticals. We have a few verticals now. There's a lot more coming, a lot of exciting stuff in the pipeline. Definitely check us out, and then hopefully it saves you some time. And anytime you save, I'll end the video with a quote, right? I think I don't know who said this, but it's a beautiful quote. The price of anything is the amount of, again, I'm paraphrasing it, but that's the essence of the quote. The price of something is the amount of life you exchange for it, right? So if Snowpal helps you save a few hours, maybe a day, a week, then that's that much more life you're getting. And if we can do that, we would be super ecstatic about that, right? That's about it. Thanks, and talk to you soon.